Welcome to the Statewide Distance Learning Project Grant Competition webinar. The contents of this webinar complement, but do not replace, the request for grant application guidelines. Interested applicants should also carefully read the Adult Education and Family Literacy Guidelines and Division of Adult Education Policies on the Division of Adult Education Grant Competitions webpage before deciding to submit an application. This webinar will provide information on the grant application, review, and award processes. We will provide a general overview of the required activities and priorities and other requirements for the grantee. Finally, we will provide suggested resources and grant tips. On April 16, 2022, a notice of availability of funds was posted in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. Posting in the bulletin allows us to inform the greatest number of potential applicants. The request for grant application guidelines was posted to the Division of Adult Education Grant Competitions webpage, and the grant application opened in eGrants on April 18th. The deadline for applicants to complete the grant is May 17th, 2022 at 2 p.m. Please note the 2 p.m. deadline. Applicants will not be able to submit the grant after that time. The Federal Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, Title II of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, provides funds to be awarded through the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Bureau of Post-Secondary and Adult Education, Division of Adult Education, to provide adult basic education services throughout the state. PDE is making available up to $300,000 of these funds to support one distance learning direct service program. PDE has elected to support a program dedicated to providing adult basic education services at a distance to meet the needs of Pennsylvania residents who are unable to access instruction locally in their areas of need. The Technical Assistance Guide for Performance Accountability under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act defines distance education as a formal learning activity where students and instructors are separated by geography, time, or both for the majority of the instructional period. Distance learning materials are delivered through a variety of media, including, but not limited to, print, audio recording, videotape, broadcasts, computer software, web-based programs, and other online technology. Teachers support distance learners through communication via mail, telephone, email, or online technologies and software. The successful applicant for the grant funding opportunity must provide all of the following services at a distance year-round through a variety of media. Adult basic education levels 1 to 6, high school equivalency test preparation, and English as a second language instruction to individuals who are unable to attend instruction at a local program. High school level math instruction, such as algebra and geometry, to supplement math instruction at local programs. Support services to help students persist in distance education. Support services to help students identify education and career goals, develop employability skills, and successfully transition to employment and post-secondary education or training as appropriate, and integration of workforce preparation activities into instruction and support services. PDE does not require the Statewide Distance Learning Project to serve as a partner in a local PA CareerLink site. However, the Statewide Distance Learning Project must ensure that it is providing career services to program participants. Full details regarding all minimum requirements for adult basic education and family literacy programs are available in the Adult Education and Family Literacy Program Guidelines. For the purposes of the competition, a draft version of the Adult Education and Family Literacy Program Guidelines for program year 2022-23 is on the Division of Adult Education Grant Competitions webpage. As defined in WIOA, an eligible provider called an eligible applicant in the request for grant application guidelines, is an organization that has demonstrated effectiveness in providing adult basic and literacy activities. Adult basic and literacy activities are academic instruction below the post-secondary level that increase students' ability to read, write, and speak in English and perform mathematics. A consortium or coalition of eligible applicants may apply for a grant. For the purposes of this competition, a consortium or coalition of agencies is defined as a main grantee with one or more sub-grantees. The main grantee will serve as both the fiscal agent for the grant and as a provider of some of the services proposed in the grant application. The main grantee is responsible for ensuring that all activities provided are completed as proposed and is responsible for monitoring and compliance of the subgrantees. Refer to Section 205.4 of the Program Guidelines for more information about the responsibilities of the main grantee in a consortium. For the purposes of establishing demonstrated effectiveness to qualify as an eligible applicant for the Statewide Distance Learning Project grant, an applicant must provide performance data on its record of improving the skills of eligible individuals, particularly eligible individuals who have low levels of literacy, and information regarding its outcomes for participants related to employment, attainment of a secondary school diploma or its equivalent, and transition to post-secondary education and training. An applicant that has been previously funded under Title II of WIOA must submit performance data required under Section 116 of WIOA. An applicant that has not been previously funded under Title II of WIOA must provide performance data to demonstrate its past effectiveness. Each individual agency in a consortium or coalition of agencies must be an eligible provider by itself. In other words, each individual agency in a consortium or coalition must be an organization that has demonstrated effectiveness in providing adult education and literacy activities and must individually provide all the data required to establish demonstrated effectiveness. PDE will require applicants to provide quantitative data for the immediately preceding 3 program years. The data provided by the applicant to establish demonstrated effectiveness must include the following data for 2018-19, 2019-20, and 2020-21. The number of individuals in the outcome cohort, which is the denominator, the number of individuals who achieved the outcome, which is the numerator, and the resulting percentage of individuals who achieved the outcome. PDE has established a minimum threshold for an applicant to be determined to be an eligible provider for the purposes of this section, which is a total number of enrolled individuals greater than or equal to 15 in each of the 3 years. For the purposes of demonstrated effectiveness to qualify as an eligible provider for the Statewide Distance Learning Project, the applicant is not limited to providing data on students served through distance learning. The tables that applicants will use to provide data for the purposes of establishing demonstrated effectiveness to qualify as an eligible provider are on the Division of Adult Education Grant Competitions webpage. There are 2 versions of the demonstrated effectiveness tables. One version of the table is for entities that received funds from the Division of Adult Education in the prior 3 program years, either as a grantee or a sub-grantee on any division-funded grant. The other version is for entities that did not receive any Division of Adult Education funds at all in the prior 3 program years. Applicants must download and complete the appropriate tables and then upload the completed documents into the Demonstrated Effectiveness to Determine Eligibility section in the application in eGrants. In the case of a consortium or coalition of agencies, each agency must complete a table with its own data, and each table must be uploaded into eGrants. Prior to reviewing and scoring submitted applications, PDE will review the information provided by each applicant, including each agency in a consortium or coalition of agencies, to establish demonstrated effectiveness to determine if that applicant is an eligible provider. Only applications that are determined to be from eligible providers will be reviewed, scored, and considered for funding. In the case of a consortium or coalition of agencies, all agencies in the consortium or coalition must be determined to be eligible providers in order for the application to be reviewed. Applicants that are not able to establish demonstrated effectiveness under the criteria described earlier are not eligible providers, and their applications will not be reviewed, scored, and considered for funding. Any applicants that are determined not to be eligible providers will be notified of that decision. PDE reserves the right to require successful applicants to submit documentation in support of the information provided to establish demonstrated effectiveness. Participants in the distance learning project's services cannot be enrolled or be required to be enrolled in secondary education. All participants must demonstrate a need for basic skills development based on the results of one of the approved standardized assessments administered before instruction starts. Participants must be at least 16 years old. Please note that in Pennsylvania, the compulsory school age is 18. Therefore, 16 and 17-year-olds are generally required to be enrolled in school. The statewide distance learning project must have evidence that any 16 or 17-year-olds in the program are not required to be enrolled in secondary school. In awarding funds, PDE will prioritize funding through the review and rating process to grant applications from eligible providers with past effectiveness in providing high-quality services at a distance that improve the skills of eligible participants and help those participants to earn high school equivalency credentials, gain and retain employment, and transition to post-secondary education or training. PDE will prioritize funding for those applications that describe proposed activities that include a thorough and detailed plan for providing the required services, evidence of the applicant's organizational capacity to meet all programmatic, reporting, administrative, and fiscal requirements of the grant, a variety of instructional options to meet the needs of students, high-quality instruction that is based on best practices and the college and career readiness standards for adult education and is of sufficient intensity to lead to student outcomes, high-quality student support services that help students to persist and succeed in adult basic education services and meet their personal, educational, and career goals, and services that align with the strategies and goals of the Pennsylvania WIOA Combined State Plan. Applicants must demonstrate that they have the required staffing and that the staff members are well-trained and meet the minimum requirements established by PDE. Programs must ensure that staff have sufficient time to perform their required duties and participate in professional development. For this grant cycle, the division has added 2 required roles: digital literacy specialist and assessment administrator. All paid staff, except administrative support staff, must dedicate at least 2% of their time to professional development each program year. In addition, to support instructional staff in preparing high-quality CCRS-based instruction, instructors must receive a minimum of 30% of their total time for preparation. That time must be for preparation and cannot be used for other duties. Refer to the draft 2022-23 Adult Education and Family Literacy Guidelines for details. The Division of Adult Education has additional requirements for teachers of mathematics at the College and Career Readiness Standards Level E, the equivalent of high school level math. These individuals must have secondary math teaching certification or a bachelor's degree or higher that ensures knowledge of mathematics required of certified math teachers. Refer to Section 204 of the Adult Education and Family Literacy Guidelines for a link to a document listing the required knowledge. Applicants may apply for up to $300,000. Applicants should apply for those funds necessary to meet the grant requirements, provide the proposed services to the number of students they can serve based on need and interest, and meet the state-imposed performance targets. The maximum allowable cost per contracted student is $2,000. Grant applications will be submitted through PDE's e-grants system. The grant requirements section of the Request for Grant Application Guidelines provides details on getting access to the Statewide Distance Learning Project grant application in e-grants. In the meantime, to allow applicants to review the content of the grant application, we have posted a PDF of the grant content to the Division of Adult Education Grant Competitions webpage. Please note that the grant content document is for reference only, as the applications will be submitted through eGrants. The eGrants system homepage has several user guides. In addition, we will post information on creating the grant on the Division of Adult Education Grant Competitions webpage. The Statewide Distance Learning Project grant application opened on April 18, 2022. The grant application deadline is May 17, 2022 at 2 p.m. At that point, the eGrant system will close the grant. In order to complete the grant, all sections must be marked complete. Once all sections are marked complete, the applicant will click the Complete button. The eGrant system records the exact time that the applicant clicks the button. Once the grant has been successfully completed, the status will be submitted for peer review. As noted earlier in the demonstrated effectiveness slides, after grants are submitted, PDE will review the evidence of demonstrated effectiveness submitted by each applicant to determine if the applicants are eligible providers. Only applications that are determined to be from eligible providers will be reviewed, scored, and considered for funding. Applicants that are not able to establish demonstrated effectiveness are not eligible providers, and their applications will not be reviewed, scored, and considered for funding. Applications will also be disqualified before review if the applicant does not answer one or more of the required questions in the narrative, or if the application is not completed by the deadline. Review teams of 3 people will review the grant applications using a scoring rubric. A summary of the scoring is in the appendix of the Request for Grant Application Guidelines. In addition, the Pennsylvania State Workforce Board will review Distance Learning Project grant applications for consistency with the strategies and goals of the WIOA Combined State Plan. The Division of Adult Education will provide the appropriate applications and review tools to the State Board after grants are submitted to the Division via eGrants. Applicants should not give their applications to the State Board directly. PDE will take the results of the review by State Board and any related recommendations to improve alignment into consideration when making the grant award. The Statewide Distance Learning Project grant will be awarded to the highest scoring applicant, provided it meets the minimum score of 131 points. The successful grant application will be approved for a 2-year grant cycle. Grant funds will be awarded through annual 1-year notifications of funding contingent on the availability of funds. Each year, the grantee will be required to submit a budget and program year specific information via the eGrant system in order to receive funding. The second year's renewal option and grant amount will be based on the following criteria: contract compliance, including success in meeting contracted enrollment and providing the contracted services, evidence of sufficient progress in meeting the state-imposed performance standards, evidence of continuous program improvement, compliance with fiscal and programmatic policies and guidelines, and the amount of the state and federal appropriation. If the grantee fails to sufficiently address the required criteria, the contract may be terminated prior to the end of the grant cycle. The Division of Adult Education is providing many resources to applicants. Links to the resources are on the Division of Adult Education Grant Competitions webpage, which can be accessed by going to PDE's website at education.pa.gov. Select Instruction, Adult Basic Education, then Grants, then Grant Competitions. Applicants should review the resources both before and during the grant writing process. The resources include the Request for Grant Application Guidelines, the Adult Education and Family Literacy Guidelines, and relevant division policies. We also provide a link to the Pennsylvania WIOA Combined State Plan. We strongly recommend that all agencies that are considering applying for the Statewide Distance Learning Project grant carefully read the Request for Grant Application Guidelines, the Adult Education and Family Literacy Guidelines, and the document with the grant content before starting the grant application. Once you begin working on the grant, be sure to read all the help buttons. They are blue circles with a question mark in them next to the question. The help buttons provide the maximum characters allowable for the answer and include information that must be addressed in the answer. Note that the maximum characters includes spaces. Make sure that all charts and tables are complete. When composing the responses for each item in the grant application, make sure the answers address the information that is being requested. Avoid including information that is not relevant to the item. Make sure the responses are clear and concise, and do not assume that the reviewers know your program. Reviewers should not have to search the answers for the necessary information or try to interpret agency-specific terminology. Unfortunately, eGrants does not allow for any formatting, bulleted or numbered lists or paragraphs. The system also has problems recognizing special characters. Some applicants write the content of their grant applications in a Word or Pages document and then copy and paste the information into eGrants. If you choose to do this, make sure the text is plain text without any formatting before copying and pasting. This will prevent issues such as apostrophes showing up as question marks and other format conversion issues. Save often. The eGrants system times out after 20 minutes of inactivity. However, it occasionally times out before that and while you are working on the grant. It is important to save regularly. For applicants that are a consortium or coalition of agencies, answers in the narrative and agency information sections of the grant application should reflect the work of the consortium or coalition as a whole rather than treat each entity separately, except where otherwise noted. As stated earlier, for the purposes of providing evidence of demonstrated effectiveness, each agency in a consortium or coalition must provide its own information. The first section in the grant is Applicants and Evidence of Demonstrated Effectiveness. This section is vital to the application because this is the section in which applicants upload the evidence to show that they are eligible providers under WIOA. Under Applicants, enter the full name of the grant applicant. In the case of consortium or coalition of agencies, each agency in the consortium or coalition must be entered separately. Each entity listed in the Applicants section must download and fill out its own appropriate demonstrated effectiveness table. Save the table as an Excel spreadsheet using the naming convention Applicant Name Demonstrated Effectiveness. Each of the completed tables must be uploaded into the grant. To upload the files, click on the Upload File button. Find the desired file on your computer and select it. Uploaded files will appear in the table under the Upload File button. In the staff section of agency information, applicants list the positions working on the working on the statewide distance learning program grant activities, including positions at all agencies in the consortium or coalition if applicable. This is a list of positions, not staff members. So if multiple individuals have the same position with the same roles, status, percentage of time on the grant, and minimum qualifications, only list the position once. The position title is the name that the agency assigns to the program. The position. Then in the roles column, include all roles that an individual in the position fulfills for the adult education program. In most programs, most positions fulfill multiple roles. All roles fulfilled by a position should be listed in the roles column. Do not list each role in a separate entry. Grantees must address all required roles listed in the Adult Education and Family Literacy Program guidelines. In minimum qualifications, include only what the agency requires to hire a position for that person for that position. Do not list the qualifications of the person currently holding the position. For example, if the agency requires clerical staff to have at least a high school diploma or equivalent, that is the information to include, even if the person currently doing clerical work has a bachelor's degree. Do not describe the duties of the position. There is a table in which to enter numbers related to staffing. The numbers in the table include all paid staff members who work on the statewide distance learning project grant activities, including staff at all agencies in the consortium or coalition, if applicable, regardless of the percentage of their overall time spent on the statewide distance learning project grant. Instructional and student support staff who are full-time employees of the agency and work activities under both the statewide distance learning project and other funding sources should be included in this table. Applicants enter the plan for instruction in the provision of instruction section in agency information. There are 4 different tables to identify the different delivery methods and types of classes. A schedule for blended classes, a schedule for fully remote real-time classes, a schedule for supplemental classes, and a table for other distance learning options. Applicants are not required to offer all these types of classes. The applicant should use the tables that correspond to the activities that they plan to offer. The information in the agency activity summary should reflect the activities that the agency proposes to provide. The table requires you to propose the number of students your program will enroll in different components and the dollar amount requested for each, ABE community-based and ASE GED community-based. ABE includes adult basic education services from ABE levels 1 through 4, plus all ESL educational levels. ASE GED includes services only at ABE levels 5 and 6. Before completing the budget, review sections 600 to 609 of the Adult Education and Family Literacy Guidelines. This covers allowable uses of funds, how to allocate allowable costs to the budget, and other fiscal requirements. Please note that in some cases, the Division of Adult Education uses the function and object codes differently than the Division of Federal Programs. Applicants must refer to our guidelines when completing the budgets. Function Code 2270 Staff Professional Development is a new function code the Division of Adult Education is using in grants that have only federal funds. Applicants should use this function code for staff time, associated benefits, and other costs directly associated with staff participation in job-related professional development activities. This means that applicants do not enter any costs associated with staff participation in professional development in the function codes 1691, 2122, 2160, 2200, 2600, or 2900. The costs of purchased professional development services continue to be allocated to 2300 as explained on the next slide. WIOA has specific requirements regarding administrative costs of federally funded adult basic education programs. The Division of Adult Education uses Function Code 2300 for these administrative costs. Under WIOA, administrative costs are capped at 5% of the grant amount. The following costs are considered administrative costs, which means they must be charged to Function Code 2300. Planning costs, including the costs associated with planning and coordination with workforce system partners. Administrative costs, including human resources, fiscal, and grant compliance. The PA CareerLink infrastructure costs paid from the grant, and contracted professional development. Since the statewide distance learning project is not required to be a partner in a local PA CareerLink site, no grant funds should be used for PA CareerLink infrastructure or shared personnel costs. The cost of contracted professional development refers to funds paid to the larger agency to cover the cost of mandated agency professional development or training and the fees paid to outside professional development providers. Any restricted indirect costs charged to the grant are also considered administrative costs and are included in the 5% cap. WIOA allows the division to agree to, through negotiations with the local program, a higher amount when the 5% cap is too restrictive to allow for adequate planning and administration. Applicants that believe that they have a strong case to negotiate administrative costs in excess of the 5% cap should budget the expected administrative costs. The division will consider the request when successful application is being processed. To prevent misallocation of grant funds, there are validations built into the budget that will prevent applications from being submitted with unallowable function code object code combinations. As you are adding entries in the budget sections, the system will allow you to save your work with incorrect combinations. However, you will not be able to mark a section complete with unallowable combinations. And in order to submit the grant, all sections must be marked complete. So do not wait until the last minute to complete the budgets. There is a budget guide at the end of the Adult Education and Family Literacy Guidelines, which identifies allowable and unallowable combinations. This concludes the Statewide Distance Learning Project Grant Application webinar. If you have any questions, please submit them to our resource email address at ra-able@pa.gov. Put Statewide Distance Learning Project in the subject line. Division of Adult Education staff will periodically post responses to submitted questions on the Division of Adult Education Grant Competitions webpage for all applicants to review. Do not send questions directly to division staff.